Hello, YouTubers and Civil War game aficionados. I have a new one, I guess, today that I kind of got into here fairly recently, but been trying to at least learn a few things before I get on here and start making all these mistakes. Though maybe that would be educational in and of itself. So, this one is Grand Tactician, the Civil War, and it does take place during the American Civil War, and there are several start options that you can have. But I'm going to start this one off in the spring of 1861. So it's before the Civil War breaks out completely. So this is basically going to be pre firing on Fort Sumter. Sorry, apparently I can't talk today. But anyway, it's actually, and I've played quite a few Civil War games. I mean, I go back to Robert E. Lee's Civil War General in the early '90s, and I really do like the Ultimate General Civil War game. Now, if you like any other Civil War titles, this one is quite a bit more intricate. You can manage everything down to the minor details. I mean, it's not just about the battles. You also want to manage your economy, manage your industry. You can build railroads. You can build all of this. You can select like specific, like again, very intricate. You can pick where you're going to place given industries and stuff. So I'll get into that more as I go along. But first, this is kind of your start screen. And again, you can start off in spring 61, summer 61, spring 62, spring 63, spring 64. And you have these start policies, okay? You can pick your side. I'm going to do this one as the Confederacy. I guess I'm just another Southern boy. But other than that, you get these interesting start policies, and I'm going to go ahead and clear all of these off. The Old Dominion basically guarantees, though honestly, I haven't seen it work any other way where Virginia doesn't secede. But this one will give you different perks. It moves the capital from Montgomery, Alabama to Richmond, Virginia, so it's closer to the front lines, if you like that idea. Support in Virginia goes up by 10, Virginia secession, yada, 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 comes as a shock to the Union, and it creates morale problems with the Union, so you can select that. Make Kansas a slave state. Southern support in Kansas goes up 25, and Southern support in all Southern states, all slave states anyway, will be up by 5. Slaves to the west, much the same thing. Southern support in Arizona, New Mexico territories is up 25. The population also increases by 25%, and recruitment becomes allowed out of those areas. Not, again, that I haven't seen that in the campaign. It's just numbers are much more limited in those areas. So and Texas also starts with a Texas also starts with a higher upgrade level, right? Apostles of Disunion, support in all slave states is increased by 20, but it also supports northern support by 10. Filibustering gives you basically gives you Cuba, which is kind of interesting, and it allows recruitment out of Cuba. King Cotton is an ag perk. Support in all slave states 5, European intervention 20, and it allows access to higher agriculture policies. Industrialization, I really like this one because obviously industrialization increases your production capacity, so down the road that plays in really big with producing arms and ships and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and pick industrialization as one of them. But also it has adverse effects towards your slave states, right? So population within the Confederacy is increased by 25%, but it lowers unity, so it reduces your national morale. And that can be affected through winning battles and things like that. So there again, this is going to depend on your play style and what you want to do. Arms Agents also is very nice, increases weapons available to the Confederacy by 50%, and also allows the Confederacy to produce Springfield-type weapons, which early game is relatively important, actually. So you have that. I'm going to consider that. Native Allies does pretty much what it sounds. Native Americans to ally against them, or ally with them against the northern oppressors. Confederate support in Indian Territory goes up 25%, and recruitment from many of the tribes is also made possible. The number of volunteers is doubled. This could actually really help to bolster ranks. And the Southern Pacific Railroad, which basically increases the Confederates' credit rating by 2, railroad and transport capacity and construction speed goes up 25%, which is also very good. If you know anything about the history of the times, railroads were very, very important for moving armies around rapidly. So what do I want to pick for my last one? I mean, the Old Dominion might be nice because it hits Union morale, but if you're any kind of a general, that might not be a problem. Recruits from the Indian Territories actually might be really nice. Confederate support goes up. You double your volunteers from that area, though there again, they're not terribly densely populated. European intervention might be really nice for, and the campaign progress I've played on, I did industrialization, arms agents, and Southern Pacific Railroad. But I might want to try to mix it up. And again, the arms agents is nice because, well, it bolsters your weapons available, which, again, historically, if you know the time period, the Union had pretty much all of the factories, all of the production, all of the population, so on and so forth. So there are some things here you can do to pre-game, as it were, and sort of, I don't know, rewrite history. Isn't that part of why we like to play these? Anyway, I'm going to go with this one just because more arms. Yeah, more arms. I'm already getting a population bolster from industrialization. So, and I'm going to turn off auto. You can start off with auto manage on. You can start off with feuds. You know, you can alter any of these also. So order delays, I like that. It makes the gameplay a little bit more realistic, actually, which is kind of nice. This is well before the days of computers, cell phones, the internet, telephones, and things like that. But you do get wire telegraphs. So anyway, the order delays is kind of a neat thing. Fog of war, I always like to have that on. That way you just don't see everything from the get-go. You know, it's going to, you actually have to keep tabs on certain choke points, if you will, across the map. The readiness system, you know, this is actually really another interesting feature because, well, if your armies aren't ready to do anything, then you can't invade enemy territory. And it also actually affects other things that you can do with your armies, and I'll get more into that probably later. I'm going to try to keep this video a little short and just show you the brief introduction, what to do, what not to do, or at least what's worked for me. So let's go ahead and start this campaign. And I guess if you're here watching this video, you really like this period in history, so I'm just trying to get my own unique perspective involved in it. I know there's other people out there that have already been working with this game since it was pre-release and things like that, but I recently picked it up on a sale, so I've been keeping an eye on this one because it sounded really good, and it is. It's very complex. Now, I'm just going to skip the intro video. All right, so this is the start in spring of '61. Uh, Most of the other Confederate states, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, these guys haven't all seceded yet. And if you'll notice, let me go ahead and pull up the South Carolina militia. Movement is not allowed during the pre-war. So a lot of what you do initially here is going to be about laying the foundations, laying the groundworks. Uh, you can see railroads. We have a couple of railroads that run out from Texas. San Antonio goes out to the west, and it cuts all the way across the south. So you have the Southwestern Railroad. And then you also have one that runs from Shreveport, and I'm just looking east to west right now. Shreveport all the way out to Savannah. Actually, no, I'm sorry. There's a little break in the line between Selma and Montgomery. It runs up to Talladega for some reason. So your Army management panels, you can come in, you can replenish units. Now be careful with this because it does take quite a bit of time. If I were to hit replenish unit, total units needed or recruits needed versus available. But also these replenish, because it takes the whole unit and sends it away. So sometimes you do want to do that if your armies have reached critical states. You can check economy alerts and stuff like that. But let's go into the basic tabs. So you have your strategy, right? And this gives you a general overview of the state of both nations. Right? You get your official records over here on the right. You have your objectives on the left. Who's your president, your head commander, and things of that nature. And you can kind of just get an idea of what's going on. So right now we're evenly matched. National morale's even. National support is a little less on the Union side to start out. Morale of the armies, Confederate slight advantage. Loyal states, the Union has quite a bit more loyal states right now. Men fielded, about the same. Navy tonnage, however, it's about a 10 to 1 advantage on the Union side. Actually, yeah, it's about that. Military experience, even, battles won, total casualties, European relations, trade, warfare, and economy. So two things heavily favored toward the Union. All right. Military, this allows you to order weapons and things of that nature, fleets, officers. You can look at all of your officers. If I take that off, you can get an idea of who you have available in your pools and things like that. This will be important as the game progresses because then you'll be able to, and actually, if you look here at the start, we already have 2 artillery pieces that we are able to produce. Now, there again, it's going to depend on funds available and things like that, but 12-pound howitzer, 24-pound howitzer, both of those have about the same cost per unit. 24-pound howitzers fire a little bit slower. You would think they would cost a little bit more too, more bronze to cast for those. Light and mountain howitzers, heavy field howitzers. Anyway, moving on to the finances. Now, this is also going to become very important. You can, again, set AI to auto-manage these. I started with the auto-manage off because I got to playing around with a few things on it. You can auto-manage weapon purchases and things like that. But with your finances, this is, well, it's, I think, relatively self-explanatory. But what I like to do early, or at least what I had been doing early that was working out pretty well, was I was taking my industry and my military spending and I was maxing them out. You've got a surplus of money. Now, every time your money drops below the positive, you issue credit. You'll issue bonds, basically. It'll inflate your money and things like that. So again, early history. There's a lot to this to keep in mind. Politics, I think I'm also going to bump up just a little bit more. And economy, I might also want to try to max this out. So, might put yourself in the hole early. However, um, down the road it pays dividends. And I'll get into the subsidies. The subsidies are actually going to be very important when you get into, I'll jump over to the projects real quick, because you'll get all of these different kinds of things that your subsidies, so as you accrue money in your subsidies, you can fill out different, different aspects here. And so different things will do different things. Like you can you can improve farm mechanization, you can increase civil order. Administration reform is actually a really important one early on, because what it does is it allows faster processing of these political decisions. And I'll go back to that. I'll come back to that when I switch over to when I jump back into the policies tab here. You can improve your infrastructure. You can authorize railroad construction, subsidizing agriculture, and things like that. So there's a lot of different stuff that you can do on the civil side. Now with the military, that's going to be pretty well straightforward as well. You can finance the building of different kinds of ships, which, as the Confederacy, is that the best place to put your money? But you'll also notice that some of these are on the diplomatic tabs, and this allows import of various weapons. You can get Austrian rifles, British rifles. I think you can even, if you can afford them, you can even come down here and get these really nice breech loading metallic, or well, not breech loading, it's a bolt action. It's one of the earliest bolt action, right? You can make a deal with the Prussians, but it costs 30 million or 13 million in your diplomacy subsidy. So it's quite expensive, but yeah, one of the first bolt action rifles, you can actually get those if you can afford it. You can rebore old muskets. So again, coming back through the other tabs, I'll go over this later. Recruit agents, rifled artillery. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do. And see, this was given access through that arms agent starting thing. So allows the Confederacy to build Springfield rifles, right? You can increase weapon production. So just these little icons on the sides will tell you what group, if you will, the subsidy applies to. So military, mostly military, but there's also some diplomatic, and actually there's an industrial one over there too. You can subsidize your domestic weapons production. That comes from your industrial pool, right? Going into the policies, now policies are going to do various things as well. You can increase your government funding, you can increase industrialization, you can get more basically volunteer units through the various militia acts, and these go all the way down through to the end here. You can improve military. Now, these policies like the military, the industrialization, the King Cotton, and I don't think government funding. No, government funding. Let me see here. Maximum amount of annual economy subsidies is increased per policy level. So government funding will also affect your economy. It'll, in other words, what it'll do is it'll allow you to put more money into these subsidies over here. So increasing those will also increase that. And diplomacy obviously is going to affect the diplomacy subsidy, and I'm going to run that up to about 1 million if I can. Yeah, we'll run that up to 1 million. Agriculture, let's run that up to 1 million as well. It does not hurt you to tamper with these early on. I say tamper, maybe not the right word exactly. Or you could just set it to auto manage and let the AI deal with all of this. But for my first policy, let's see here. Introducing new sources of income to finance the war effort. I think what I like to do typically first is up the government. I'm going to go with government funding first. Now, you can have multiple policies going at the same time, but it does split your quote unquote research on these kinds of things. So, early game, probably best to do one at a time. See, it's 26.2 days. Now, if I were to engage the Militia Act as well, see, it went from 10 to 22.8, and this went to 57. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that off of there, just to kind of show you what's going on. And this also shows you, this also will show you what the this shows you what both you and the AI chose for starting policies. All right. So anyway, there is that. Buildings in production. This will give you a really good overview of basically what your buildings are producing. All right. And you can set the filter to all, and this tells you everything. This gives you a list of everything, right? Or you can isolate and say, okay, I want to see what banks I have, what farms do I have, and so on and so forth. All right. So that's buildings in production, and then I guess where would that be? Oh, yeah, no, it gives you production values of what each of those buildings are producing, right? So the per annum production of the farms in Grenada, Mississippi, are forage, wool, livestock, horses, and it tells you the various numbers for that. Goods and trade also, it's a tab I haven't fooled around with too terribly much. However, you don't want to overlook it because it actually tells you, let's see here, availability of cheap salt increases output by, and this actually is also very useful because it tells you, okay, these are your goods that are basically in demand by your various industries. Niter, availability of cheap coal increases output by a factor of 2.0. So these are all things to consider. All right. Now, other things you can do, you have federal buildings, you have company applications, and you have railroads. You can start off by building the Houston-Shreveport Railroad. This gives you an idea, it just gives you an idea of what each of these railroads will do. So the Houston-Shreveport will increase tax revenues by another $2 million. It's 212 days to build. Transport capacity goes up. But here's what happens, is the cost of $31 million. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some federal buildings first, though, and obviously prison camps. Now, this is something that I don't know if anybody else addresses, but if you'll notice the cost. Notice the cost, how it adjusts based on where you want to put it. So actually, this is something to consider as you get into placing buildings. So what I want to do is I want to look for a good cheap place to put a prison camp. 45,000. Oh yes, we'll go right there. All right, get a prison camp built, and then this is another thing that that makes this very interesting. You can look at your market influences. Okay, check your market influences because it shows the markets for your important place. What's the IIP again? It's an important something or other. Important infrastructure point, right? Now, if you look at your market influences, the South doesn't start off with much. We've got one over over there near Charlotte, and we've also got one down in New Orleans. Now, what markets will do, and this is what market influences are important about, is because the infrastructure points within those areas have increased transport capacity due to improved logistical conditions. So another thing that's a good idea anyway, but by no means have to, you can just set this to auto manage and auto place. But another good idea, very good idea, is to build a few markets to start off, because what that's going to do is that's going to improve your trade network. All right, so improve that trade network. Improve trade network. Do I want to build one out in San Antonio right now, or there's another place I like to go is typically here at Houston. 2.4, 2.5, or do I build one down here at Galveston? Now, I haven't noticed if there's a difference if you place them near these key cities, or if it's better to place them near the IIPs. I don't know yet. I like to put this one here on Houston, because Houston's kind of an important crossroads, but I don't know if I'm going to do that just yet. Jackson, Mississippi. I built one over here in Montgomery. So what I try to do with these markets is I try to place them at crossroads. Crossroads are, you know, obviously it's because it's where a lot of goods and trade are flowing through. So it's a really good idea to place some in those areas. Let me see here, and I don't have anything there, so I think I'm going to do one more. And again, you might put yourself into the hole doing something like this, but or at least early on. But nonetheless, down the road it does pay dividends. And then for company applications, if you really wanted to fool around with this, you can say, okay, here's a tab I like to look at: production and demand. All right. That's rice, that's iron, gunpowder, iron. So you have high iron demand in here. So there's one building, probably a foundry. And then you can notice, okay, if you want to get into selecting where exactly you want your buildings to go, you can kind of get an idea. Okay, price level of sold goods versus price level of pre-goods. And you want to try to find a really good balance between the two: 8674, 8673. And available workforce also actually is an important number, because that's going to, the more workforce you have available, obviously the more productive the facility itself is going to be. 8774. 8573. That's about 12%. That's about 13%. That's about 13%. So it gets more expensive over that way. 86 to 73. 90 to 74. Montgomery might be a good place to start with a foundry. And there again, you can use these as sort of a guide point. It's not like this is the best place to put it, but it gives you an idea of where to put certain buildings. So that's 16%. It's not bad for one of those. 86, 84. Yeah, that's terrible. 85, 71. 90, 65. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put this this foundry in over here by Montgomery. I think 67. Yeah. All right. So that's that. And there again, if you really want to, at the very start, you can go ahead and pay the freight, pun intended, to build a railroad from the get-go, or you can try to wait for this to build up. So additional subsidies of 31 million. Otherwise, the cost is going to be how much to start this railroad? Increases trade flow, supply, and unit transport speed. To speed up construction, the government can grant transport subsidies. So you can wait on that, or you can start it off immediately. 6.2 million. And that's going to fall under, let me see here, railroad construction. So you can wait on that. Increases the speed of constructing new railroad lines. So that's 212 days. That's kind of a long wait. And that came under the politicals, I do believe, wasn't it? Yes, railroad construction is a political subsidy. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is max out the political subsidy funding as well. And that's going to hurt our surplus for the time being. But there again, down the road, it should pay off. So the economy is undergoing expansion, which is very nice. And then wealth, of course, well, we are in the South, so wealth was concentrated in the hands of a very few people. So there's pretty much an initial setup. And that's why, actually, so you want to pay attention to these economic things as well, because that can really affect stuff. So you notice there's an iron works here. There's an ordnance work. There's a factory over here. That's a limestone niter cave. But nonetheless, and then you can get an idea of what various resources are going to do. So this is Grand Tactician, the Civil War, and that's basically one way of many to start the game. So you would of course come down here and hit play, and you immediately get some news. All right, don't neglect the newspapers. Sometimes they tell you very, very relevant things. You can read the news column itself or not. It all depends on you. And while you're looking at these, this does pause the game. So that's also a rather nice feature. All right. You get that. You got an adjustment slider, and really, since there's not much to do at the get-go, you can just kind of blaze on through this early stuff. So you'll notice the Confederacy has issued bonds because our money has, well, it had run down. So we issued some more bonds to finance some of those building projects and, of course, our government subsidies. All right. And like I said, I'm just going to roll right on through on high speed because you can't move your armies. The only thing you can really do is build more stuff if you choose to. But what I am trying to do, loyalties in Missouri turn, states drifting towards secession. And you'll notice that as time goes by, the more money you have in your various subsidies, the faster these will fill up. So for me, diplomacy, I'm not looking at spending a lot in diplomacy on weapons right now. I'm probably going to try to focus more on homegrown weaponry. Do I want to get the Springfield rifles early or not? Well, that's going to depend, right? And since I only have howitzers to build at the start, I'm going to let's go ahead and pause this real quick because we did have some intelligence ports come up. So the federal government's discussing industrialization. Federal relations with Spain are at 0. The morale of the federal armies is at 97% with a 3% loss recently, actually, which is kind of good news. And then, of course, your economy reports also come in. So pay attention to these. Pay attention to these. Corporate production is the same as it was the last month. Export volume was 15 million, while 12 million worth of goods was imported. And then it tells you, of course, what buildings you had built. So we built 3 markets, a prison camp, and a foundry. And then, of course, it tells you also how your people are doing. The wealth is at below average and increasing compared to the previous month. So we've also got, we're improving the state of economic affairs in the South. Texas joins the Confederacy, though that's almost redundant because you start off with Texas anyway. Fulfilling the manifest destiny, so on and so forth. And we can come back to policies, and you'll notice it's down to 16 days on that funding. I'm going to go with funding first this time. Normally, the last couple of times I've done some trial runs on this, I started off with industrialization. But I think I'm going to go with government funding simply because, well, it's going to improve our financial situation. The South wasn't as economically sound as the North. And I'm just going to try to run this up to where gunfire happens on Fort Sumter, because that's where we kick off and get into the actual, okay, now I have armies to manage. Or better yet, if I stop and consider it, this is probably a good place to cut off the video for today. So, or again, you know, it's if you decide to start off in the spring of 1861, it's really kind of a lot of waiting. But what you can do while you wait for that is better secure your financial situation. So hence, you can build more industries than I did. You can build more markets than I did, prison camps. You will notice that the South does not start off with the option to build a bank. Now, this is something that you find on your projects tab, where you can basically subsidize banks. Or actually, is there a different one? Market reform also is a really good one. You know, these are economics that you can work with. But in order to build banks, I think you have to subsidize the banks first. No, you have to research the Bank Act. So that's going to be under policies. You would need the Bank Act, which is going to be, and this is policies that you can research. Revenue Act, Revenue Act, Revenue Act, Nationalized Trade. Where is that Bank Act? Ah, there it is. It's all the way down in Chapter 3. So the Bank Act takes a little while to get to. I guess it works for the Union as well. You do start off with one bank down in New Orleans. But other than that, if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, subscribe. Give me some feedback too, for those of you out here that are far more experienced at this than I am. Until the next step in the campaign, YouTube, this has been Wolf190D, and I'll catch you next time. Till then.